Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Gail Carson. Welcome to Living Regret Free, a program that shows you how to live a better and more joyful life. As an added bonus, I invite you to listen to an introduction to my Mindset Matters program, which ties into this so well. Go to www.sobmindset.com. It's free, and I know you will enjoy it. If you'd like to contact me personally, drop me a line at gailcarson13@gmail.com or go to my website, www.spunkyoldbroad.com, and sign up for my weekly newsletter. Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Gail Carson, and we're on Living Regret Free. And my guest today is Scott Garliss. And Scott, which I love that name because that's my son's name, spent 22 years on Wall Street working with some of the top investment banks, including Wachovia and Stifel Nicolaus. His clients were some of the world's largest hedge and mutual funds. And what he does is he helps the common investor by sharing that knowledge and help making them know that investing can be simpler, which, is interesting because I am someone who knows nothing about that at all. I was born into real estate only because that was my husband's passion. So that's where all my knowledge is. But I never invested in investment, so to speak. So welcome, Scott. And you're going to give our audience a whole lesson in what they need to know to make them solvent in the future, correct?
I will do my best. Yes.
Okay. So
thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And let's start off by asking you with, what do you think about the state of the current economy? It's always amazing to me, when I do tune into any of the shows and they'll say, well, the stock market is down and the stock market is up. And then you see where it is at 31,000 something. And, I've never invested in the stock market, so I couldn't give you any information on that. But what do you think about the current economy, especially with so many small businesses closing and so many big businesses profiting?
Yeah, I think the current economy is in a much better spot than, if you look at the headlines every day, see some of the TV reports, you wouldn't get the sense that we're in as good of a spot as we're in. But, a lot of sectors and demand has picked back up to pre-COVID levels. And again, I know that's hard to believe, but like the housing industry in particular, because of things that the Fed did when the COVID crisis hit, what they did with rates and supporting the economy, the housing market has boomed. I have friends.
That's so true. I mean, I've got people who are part of my business networking and my mastermind groups that are in real estate, and the housing market is booming, but the commercial real estate market is not.
Yeah, well, part of that is all the people that have moved out of cities into the suburbs. That's driving more housing demand. And I think those people are finding that their lives are a little less stressful living out in the suburbs than they were in the city. But part of that, commercial real estate, that is, a lot of it can be city centric. They're seeing tenants drop off. I have buddies in commercial real estate that one friend of mine was telling me he was about to sign a deal pre-COVID for 80,000 square feet for 10 years. That same person has now come back for 30,000 feet for 5 years. That's a big difference.
I believe that because people are, first of all, enjoying working from home, and they'll enjoy it even more when the schools get back in circulation, so they don't have to homeschool at the same time. But people are saying, we're getting more done by working from home. And even the groups that I run, I mean, I have a mentorship group for not-for-profits and a couple of other things. And what took us 3.5 hours in person meetings, we now do online in less than 2 hours. So it's made a big difference. And even though I know there are people that say I miss, my peers, and I miss being with people, and I understand that totally, still, I think we're going to really go with the hybrid version from now on. So what do you think of the White House current economic policy?
Yeah, I think what they're trying to do, I understand it. So the White House wants to introduce a big stimulus plan right now, and there are many people in Congress that are in favor of this, and there's some that are adamantly against it. But they're really trying to make sure the economy gets completely back on its feet. And I think we're largely there, other than say like the restaurant industry and and some of the travel industries. But so what they're doing is they're almost going to try to overdo it. And the worry with that is what is the consequence going to be down the road of all this money printing, and are we going to have inflation issues? Now, I don't think we're going to have them for a while, but at some point there is going to be a price to pay for that.
Well, and usually, I mean, look, we're used to things going up and down. When things are good, they sometimes get bad, and when they're bad, then they become good again. So we have this, up and down curve. But all these stimulus proposals, is that going to help or hurt the general public? Not the biggies, but the general public.
Yeah, I think ultimately that is going to help the general public. There's some people that need it very badly, and there are others that don't. But I think the point of all these things that are happening right now is they're helping people feel better about their situation and they feel better about what's going on. So they're going to spend. The consumer accounts for 70% of economic output. And it's very important that that consumer feels confident about going out and spending. If they don't, we're in a much worse place from an economic standpoint. We're talking about, I know we've seen bad job losses, but we're getting a lot of those jobs back. If the consumer doesn't feel good about where they are and what's happening, things would be way worse than what we're dealing with right now.
But, I look at some of the stimulus proposals, and I'm thinking, Congress is fighting over how much whether it should be $1,400, whether it should be $1,200, whether it should be $600. Yep. Let me tell you something. In the time that they have been fighting about this, people, what is it really going to mean? Because people still can't pay their rent. They still can't buy food. By the time they settle on this, there are people that, if you were looking for it's coming, they're really in a deep, dark place.
Yeah, totally agreed. Now, we are seeing things have improved, but there are still some people that are very much in a bad spot. And yeah, you wonder why they just can't sort of say, hey, look, this needs to be done. And sure, we're going to overspend on some, but it feels like, the places where you're going to overspend are worth it because of the impact and the difference it's going to make for those people that really need it. And I don't know, in some instances, you wonder a little bit, are they trying to, get the needle in the haystack? It's just, unfortunately, with Congress and with politics, not so much politics, but just the way DC works, it's tough to do things and get it down to a fine point. You just sort of have to do a blanket stimulus package, and that's what's going to happen. But again,
it's true. It's true, Scott. But I can tell you the reason they can't come to agreement is because none of them have had their own incomes affected. If they had to pay for health care and they had to, eke out a living, and they had to have a way to get their mortgage payments done or their rent payments done, they would have come to this conclusion a long time ago.
Oh, yeah.
They're not living in that reality.
No, they're not. Not at all.
So that makes a big difference. So what can a person do to protect themselves?
Yeah, so again, with all this stimulus that's coming in and things that Fed has done, what that has created is that has inflated the dollar supply. So that means there are more dollars available now than there were prior. And when you're inflating the dollar supply, you really have to break it down to a simple scenario of more dollars available means the dollar is worth less. So you are creating inflation, and things that are priced in dollars, like let's say you wanted to buy an ounce of gold. If you bought it before the pandemic, it would have cost you less than if you buy it now. Simply just looking at the standpoint of more dollars available, you have to use more to buy that same thing. So what people can do to protect themselves is they can invest, and they can invest in assets, whether it be real estate, precious metals, stocks, things like wine, artwork, things that are going to go up in value. Now, I recommend you look at things like real estate, commodities, stocks, bonds, because they're going to be more liquid assets and easier to get into and out of. But I think, you need to supplement yourself on an income basis, because if you're just sitting there and you only have the dollars you bring home from work every day, and that's your only measure of wealth, as the government prints more money and it becomes worth less, your net value goes down every time they increase the dollar amount.
Well, that I understand. Now, one thing I don't understand at all is Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And I see where it is going up and up and up and up and up. And, to me, it's something that's not real. But what is your opinion about Bitcoin?
Yeah, so Bitcoin again, it has a very similar situation. Again, it's priced in dollars, so you got to look at it as a store of value in the dollar. But the other thing I think we have to think about is Bitcoin, sort of like electric vehicles. When electric vehicle chatter first started, say back in like 2000, when we started talking about companies like Tesla, people were very skeptical. But we have to look. I'm turning 50 this year, and I try to put myself in the shoes of where a 20-year-old graduating from college might want to be. And the way they look at the world is they want electric cars, and that's a passion of theirs. And so that makes investing in things like electric vehicles and the industries that are going to support them a viable investment, because that's the way it's headed. The people who sell those items are going to want to appeal to those people. And cryptocurrency sort of falls into that same realm. That is the way the younger generation wants to start paying for things going forward. They're very interested in cryptos and they want to see changes. And I think it's hard. It was hard for me at first to get over my skepticism. And then when I started to think about it differently in the terms of the way I was viewing it, and realize, this is the wave of the future. And then not only that, but it also makes transactions faster, safer, and it makes banks more money when they're transacting in crypto because they cost less. And when I thought about that as well, that, hey, you're telling me I can invest in something that makes banks money, that became very interesting to me, because if you can tell a bank that you have something that can make them money, the last time I checked, that's what they're in the business to do.
Wow. Wow. That's very interesting. So, why is the investing public
Yep.
so easily attracted to the negative press? And of course, I know that negativity sells, ads. I know it sells TV time, but
Yeah.
why are they so attracted to the negative press?
I mean, and you hit the nail on the head. People are always interested in what's going to hurt them more than they are in what's going to help them, I feel like. So they get very attracted to this clickbait that makes these fantastic claims. I read a guy over the weekend was saying that the U.S., he was comparing the U.S. right now to the Weimar Republic, which was Germany in pre-World War II, and was basically saying that what's going on right now with money printing is we're going to wind up in a situation where people are going to show up at, say, a bakery to buy a loaf of bread with a wheelbarrow full of money. I think that's a bit ridiculous and fantastic, but for some reason, it's human nature to go for those things. And
They say that about in Venezuela, that you need, all of that money because they keep devaluating it. And,
yep.
it's kind of the same principle.
Yeah, I think, and I understand why we are attracted to what's going to hurt us, and we always want to be prepared for that. And there's nothing wrong with that. We should be. But I think the problem with being attracted to all that negativity is it scares us out of doing things that are going to help us in the long term. Versus, if you don't read that, you might be doing more things that are going to help you and taking advantage of opportunities that are put in front of you instead of, pulling back into a shell, being like, someone that just might say, I just got to hang on to every single dollar I have, and never investing in and accentuating their income potential because they're so scared of what may or may not happen.
I so agree with you. It's very interesting. We're kind of a real estate family. When I got married, my husband was all gung ho on real estate, and we did really, really well because I handled the money and he handled the construction, and never the twain shall meet, and it worked out really well. And my son, who went with my husband on all these real estate ventures from the age of like 6 or 7, and of course, and I sent him to law school, and he majored in real estate finance, and he reads like 7 or 8 papers a day, and so forth. But he's really sharp on real estate. But I can tell you that it also predicts that we go through these downturns and upturns every 10 years, you know. In
Yep.
fact, I think it said that Bill Gates predicted this pandemic 5 years ago. So, what do you see in 10 to 15 years? Where do you think we'll be?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. We are always going to go through cycles, right? And it's interesting. There's a guy I really like who basically said at the beginning or the end of 2019 that we were in the midst of a 30-year economic boom cycle, and that we were due for a recession, and we hit one in last year. And basically, there's going to be a recession that happens in another 15 years of solid growth. I actually think there were a lot of things that were happening and put in place coming, out of what happened with the pandemic and the economic shutdown. I think we're at the beginning of another long run in the economic cycle. I think our economy is going to do very well. The U.S. is talking about investing more in things like putting, semiconductor manufacturing. This has been a big conversation recently, but they've already been working on this in semiconductor manufacturing plants here in the United States, because more of what we're doing is headed in the direction of technology. But I think as a country, we're thinking a little more about, hey, we need to be the masters of our own destiny, and we need to make sure we're doing more to control where our future goes instead of letting it lie in the hands of others. And I think ultimately that's a recipe for success. Now that doesn't mean we're going to shut off relationships with the rest of the world. I don't think that'll happen in the least. But I do think this situation has raised a lot of good questions in the United States, and I think we're going to be stronger and better off in the long run because of what we've been through and because of the questions we've asked ourselves.
Well, I do think that we have to be masters of our own universe, and I do think that we need to be a leader, and I do think we can't ignore what goes on around us, because that's what makes us a team player. But it's sometimes difficult. I mean, if I was someone, let's just say, I was someone who opened a small, restaurant a
Yeah.
year ago. And I mean, I put my savings, my life savings into it. And I had a really good place. I mean, I people liked it. We were building customer value. We had great food. And then boom, we couldn't operate anymore. And some people did a great turnaround. They worked with takeout, and they worked with those places that said, yeah, you can have outdoor dining, etc. But there were also a lot of people who just couldn't make that turn. So what? And then, of course, does that make them not want to try again? Does that make them, I better go back to getting a job? What happens to those people?
Yeah, I think all of that too. It's part of the cycle, like you mentioned earlier. And the fact that you're familiar with real estate. I grew up. My dad was in the construction business, and it can be feast or famine sometimes. And it just, I remember when I was a kid, in the 70s when interest rates were like 20%. It was crazy. But yeah, it's so they're resets, and I think in instances like that where we see businesses that wind up being over levered and they've probably extended credit too far. Those are the ones that ultimately they wind up folding. It's not ideal. We hate to see people lose jobs. We hate to see anybody lose a business that they've spent years developing. But it does happen. And the hope is that when that happens, it allows these other businesses, and say you just started a year ago, but you don't have crazy debt because you have invested your life savings. I would hope that through some of the restructuring the government's recently announced in the PPP is basically that these businesses are going to be able to stay afloat. They will come out of it. The ones that have less debt and less leverage will come out of it, and we'll see a stronger business cycle on the other side of that. I think we're learning tons of lessons right now through the coronavirus pandemic that we haven't learned before. And as a society, what we're seeing is one of the great points of American society right now, where we're all learning how to adapt and we're learning to push forward and get ahead. And I think that's something America has always been great at and always will be great at. And I think that is all going to lead to a better cycle on the other side. And it's never fun again when people go under and people lose jobs, but I think they'll get swept back up in the tide. And I would hope that a lot of those people that endeavor to start a new business get that opportunity again. It's too difficult to say whether or not they will.
Yeah, I know, and it takes so much. I don't know. It's a punch to the gut, you know. So
Yes.
it's difficult. I mean, I was a person that traveled 4 or 5 times a month for speaking and for conferences and so forth, and I have over 4 million miles on American, so you can imagine
Wow.
how much I did. But now I don't care if I really go anywhere. So because I've just adapted to using Zoom and so forth and so on.
Yep.
So we have about 5 minutes left, Scott. Tell people, first of all, where they can get a hold of you, how they can get a hold of you. I don't know if you have a gift that you want to give anybody, but, how can people reach you?
Yeah, unfortunately, I do not have a gift. But what I will say, people can reach me if they go to stansberryinvestor.com. We have a lot of free newsletters that you can sign up there for that can help you with investing and teach you some basic investing techniques and keep you up on everything that's going on, just sort of in the stock market, some of the real estate markets, things like that, just to keep you in tune with what's going on right now with investing. And hopefully, we also have paid stuff there if people are interested that we have some really great investing ideas, and our analysts have some great track records. That would be the best way to come find me and find the rest of my firm and see what we're talking about.
So that's Stansberry, Stansberry, investor.com.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And, another thing which I think is really important too is to understand what you're getting yourself involved in. So this is something that Scott can help you with, and I sure hope you take advantage of going to his site and seeing what he has available. I want to remind everybody also about my site, spunkyoldbroad.com. If you go there, you'll see the Facebook group, which is free for the SOB Virtual Club. You'll see my SOB University, which has my self-study online programs, and you'll see my store where you can get neat coffee mugs with great sayings and t-shirts and leggings and all kinds of things. And, I just hope that you'll also subscribe to my Spunky Old Broad YouTube site. But in talking to you, Scott, I think people need to be aware that they can't be an ostrich. They can't duck their head in the sand. They've got to, they've got to make themselves aware. They can't say, well, I don't understand this, or I don't know about this, or whatever. I mean, at my point in life, I say, all I want to do is have a great day.
Yes.
I don't want to buy any more real estate. I don't want to, whatever I do, I'll do through my son. But I can tell you that there are people, which I still don't understand, who are just money stupid, money, I guess, just not understanding what money is, what money can do, how money is used. They look at people with money and say, oh, they must be bad people, or they're doing something illegal or whatever. But we have about 2 minutes left. Is there any advice that you would like to give that we haven't talked about?
Yeah, sure. So, you talk about living regret-free, and I feel like by investing, that allows you the opportunities to do more of those things that put you in a spot where you are living regret-free. You do all those things. But again, I think people need to become financially literate and understand what's available to them. And again, take control of your own destiny. Diversify your revenue stream. This is only going to help you earn more income. And it's going to be a great way to put yourself in a spot where you're not worried about, say, something going on with the government or all these things you can't control, but you are doing things to make sure you're taking control of your life and your financial situation.
And that's the truth. You can't plead innocence. You've got to take control of your life. And even though money is something that, as you've been growing up, maybe something you've been told not to talk about, or you have had parent tapes put in your mind about what having a lot of money means. The whole point of all of this is you need to be financially secure because that's called freedom. So, Scott, thank you so much for being with us today. I think you've pointed out a lot of important factors to our listeners, and hopefully they'll go to your site and they will enjoy what you have to offer them. So, thank you so much for being with us today.
Gail, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's show. I choose my guests carefully, so if you have someone you'd like me to interview, please drop me a line at gailcarson13@gmail.com. In the meantime, check out my intro program, Mindset Matters, at www.sobmindset.com. See you next week.